Tom Wells pressed his face against the transport ship's window, watching as Outpost Station 9 grew larger in the darkness of space. The station looked like a giant metal spider, with its 8 extending arms glowing with blue lights. Each arm housed different research laboratories, making it the biggest deep space research facility in the known galaxy. "First time at OS9?" the transport pilot asked, noticing Tom's excitement. "Yes," Tom replied, adjusting his glasses. "I'd spent 3 years applying for this position. Never thought I'd actually get it." The pilot nodded but didn't say anything more. Tom noticed his hands grip the controls a bit tighter as they approached the station. Something about that small gesture made Tom feel uneasy. The docking process took 20 minutes, longer than usual because of extra security checks. Tom had read about OS9's strict protocols, but experiencing them firsthand was different. Every seal, every airlock, and every scanner seemed to be checking for something specific. When Tom finally stepped onto the station, a tall man in a blue uniform was waiting for him. "Dr. Wells, I'm Jack, head of station security. Welcome to OS9. His handshake was firm, almost too firm. "Before you meet your research team, we need to go through the safety briefing." Tom followed Jack through pristine white corridors. Other researchers they passed looked busy, but also alert. They reminded Tom of prey animals in the wild, always aware of their surroundings. The security office was small, but filled with screens showing different parts of the station. Jack motioned for Tom to sit down, then pressed a button that sealed the door with a heavy click. "Dr. Wells, your file says you're here to study newly discovered species. That's true, but it's not the whole truth." Jack pulled up a holographic image. "This is why we have so much security." The image showed a creature that made Tom's breath catch in his throat. It was huge, maybe 3 meters tall when standing upright. Its body was covered in what looked like shifting shadows, making it hard to focus on any one part. 6 limbs ended in claws that could probably cut through metal, and its head housed 4 eyes that seemed to glow with intelligence. "We call them shadow stalkers," Jack continued. "They're the reason we lost 3 research teams last year. 2 the year before that. And those are just the official numbers." Tom leaned forward, fascinated despite the warning in Jack's voice. "I've never seen anything like it. The way its skin seems to absorb light. That's exactly the kind of scientific curiosity that gets people killed," Jack cut in sharply. "These aren't just animals, Doctor. They're intelligent. They problem solve. They set traps. And worst of all, they seem to enjoy the hunt." Jack showed more images. Destroyed research vessels, demolished outposts, and security footage of shadow stalkers moving with terrifying speed and coordination. Most researchers here won't even study them remotely anymore. The ones who do use triple-secured labs and never leave the station. Jack's eyes locked onto Tom's. "Whatever you came here to study, whatever projects you're planning, remember this: if you see a shadow stalker, you don't observe it. You don't try to communicate with it. You trigger your emergency beacon and pray our security teams reach you before it does." Tom nodded, but his mind was already racing with questions. How did they communicate? What was their social structure? Why did they attack some research teams but completely ignore others? "One last thing," Jack added, standing up. "We've noticed they're getting more curious about us. Each encounter shows them learning, adapting. 3 days ago, one of them figured out how to partially disable our security sensors. We had to completely rewrite our detection protocols." As Tom left the security office, his excitement hadn't diminished. It had grown. Yes, shadow stalkers were dangerous, maybe the most dangerous species in the galaxy. But something about them felt different from simple predators. There was purpose in their actions, patterns waiting to be understood. That night, in his new quarters, Tom stayed up late reading every report he could find about shadow stalker encounters. He knew he should be frightened, but all he felt was wonder. Somewhere out there, these incredible creatures were waiting to be understood. And despite all the warnings, despite all the danger, Tom knew he would be the one to understand them. He just didn't know how soon that understanding would come, or what it would cost. 3 weeks after his arrival at Outpost Station 9, Tom sat in a small research shuttle, preparing for his first sample collection mission. He had spent these weeks learning station protocols and studying local wildlife, but his mind kept drifting back to the shadow stalkers. "Remember, stay within the safe zone," Jack's voice crackled through the radio. "The moon's magnetic field interferes with our sensors beyond that point. We won't be able to track you." "Understood," Tom replied, running through his pre-flight checks. The shuttle was small but sturdy, designed to withstand harsh environments. Its collection equipment took up most of the space, leaving just enough room for one person to work comfortably. The flight started smoothly. Tom watched as OS-9 grew smaller behind him, while the gray surface of the moon filled his view ahead. He was supposed to collect mineral samples from an area that showed unusual energy readings. Everything went wrong an hour into the mission. First, the shuttle's navigation system started showing strange readings. Then the engine made a sound that no engine should ever make. Tom tried to turn back, but the controls became sluggish, then stopped responding completely. "OS-9, this is Wells," he called into the radio. "I'm having technical difficulties. Request immediate." The radio died mid-sentence. The shuttle was falling now, dropping toward the moon's surface. Tom's training kicked in. He diverted all remaining power to the emergency landing systems and braced for impact. The crash wasn't as bad as it could have been. The shuttle skidded across the gray surface, throwing up clouds of dust before coming to rest on its side. Warning lights flashed everywhere, but the hull was intact. Tom was alive. He checked his location on the backup systems. His heart sank. The crash had carried him far beyond the safe zone, into an area marked in red on his maps. Shadow Stalker territory. Following protocol, Tom activated his emergency beacon and secured the shuttle's entrances. Then he did what any good scientist would do. He started taking notes about his situation. The first hour passed quietly. The second hour, too. During the third hour, something moved outside. Tom froze, his hand halfway through writing another note. Through the shuttle's main window, he saw a shadow that seemed darker than the others. It moved like liquid smoke, flowing across the rocky ground with impossible grace. A shadow stalker. It was even more impressive in person than in the images. The creature stood taller than the shuttle, its 6 limbs moving in perfect coordination. Its skin seemed to absorb the light around it, creating an effect like living darkness. But what caught Tom's attention most were its eyes, all 4 of them, glowing with a deep purple light. The creature circled the shuttle twice, studying it. Tom knew he should be terrified, but his scientific mind was too busy observing. The shadow stalker wasn't attacking. It was investigating, showing clear signs of intelligence and curiosity. Then Tom noticed something odd. The creature's movements weren't as smooth as they should be. It favored its right side, and one of its middle limbs barely touched the ground. Was it injured? Looking more carefully now, Tom could see signs of recent meteor impacts in the area. Small craters dotted the ground, some still smoking. The shadow stalker must have been caught in the meteor shower. The creature came closer to the shuttle, close enough that Tom could see the texture of its skin. It looked like living metal, but flexible, with patterns that shifted and changed. One of its eyes met Tom's gaze through the window. In that moment, something unexpected happened. Instead of seeing a mindless predator, Tom saw pain in those eyes, intelligence, and something else, curiosity that matched his own. Every safety protocol, every warning, every rule said he should stay in the shuttle and wait for rescue. But Tom Wells hadn't become a xenobiologist by following rules when discovery called. He looked at his medical kit, then back at the injured shadow stalker. A crazy idea was forming in his mind. The kind of idea that either got people killed or changed history. Tom took a deep breath and started gathering supplies. He knew what Jack would say about this, but he also knew he couldn't just sit and watch a creature suffer, even if that creature was supposed to be the deadliest predator in the galaxy. Sometimes, he thought, the greatest discoveries come from following your heart instead of your fear. Tom's hand shook as he prepared the medical supplies. Through the shuttle window, the injured shadow stalker watched his every move. Its 4 purple eyes tracked him with an intensity that made him question his decision every few seconds. "I must be crazy," he muttered, organizing the items he'd need. Bandages, healing gel, pain relievers designed for large alien life forms, and his tablet for taking notes. The real challenge would be getting close enough to help without becoming the creature's next meal. Tom had noticed something interesting during his observations. The shadow stalker communicated through body language that seemed almost familiar. When it was studying the shuttle, its movements reminded him of curious Earth cats, cautious but interested. He opened the shuttle's small airlock and took his first step onto the moon's surface. The shadow stalker immediately tensed, its shadowy form seeming to grow larger. Tom froze, then slowly raised his empty hands. "Easy there," he said softly, knowing the creature probably couldn't understand his words but might understand his tone. "I just want to help." The shadow stalker's injured limb twitched, and Tom saw fresh dark liquid, probably blood, seeping from a wound. The meteor strike must have left something embedded in its flesh. Moving with deliberate slowness, Tom placed his medical supplies on the ground. He mimicked a limping motion, then pointed to his own medical kit, trying to communicate his intentions. The creature tilted its head, reminding Tom again of a curious cat. Its skin patterns shifted, creating swirling designs that seemed to reflect its thoughts. Tom noticed that when the patterns moved faster, the creature seemed more agitated. When they moved slowly, it appeared calmer. He took another careful step forward. The shadow stalker didn't retreat. Instead, it lowered itself slightly, bringing its injured limb closer to Tom's level. Was it actually understanding? "I'm going to help you," Tom said, keeping his voice steady and calm. "But you need to promise not to eat me." He managed a small smile, his scientific excitement starting to overcome his fear. Working carefully, Tom approached the injured limb. Up close, the shadow stalker's skin was even more fascinating. It wasn't just dark. It seemed to be made of living shadows that moved and flowed like water. The wound was clear now. A jagged piece of moon rock was lodged in the creature's flesh. The area around it was swollen and hot to the touch. Tom pulled out his medical scanner and was surprised when the shadow stalker didn't object to the device's soft beeping. "This is going to hurt," Tom warned, preparing to remove the rock. He knew this was the dangerous part. Animals often lashed out when in pain, and this was no ordinary animal. The shadow stalker's eyes locked onto his. In that moment, Tom felt something unexpected, a connection. The creature was intelligent enough to understand it needed help, and it was choosing to trust him. With steady hands, Tom removed the rock and quickly applied healing gel to the wound. The shadow stalker made a sound, a low vibration that Tom felt in his chest, but didn't attack. Its skin pattern swirled slowly, almost peacefully. As Tom wrapped the injury with a special stretching bandage, he talked softly about what he was doing. The creature listened, its head tilted, obviously interested in his voice. "I'm going to call you Swift," Tom said as he finished the bandaging. "Because despite your injury, you move like flowing water." Swift, the shadow stalker, shifted its weight, testing the bandaged limb. The movement was already smoother, less painful. Then it did something that made Tom's scientific heart nearly stop. It mimicked the head tilt Tom had been using while working. Tom laughed in surprise and delight. "You're copying me. You're learning." Swift's skin patterns created a gentle swirling pattern, and its purple eyes seemed to glow a bit brighter. It moved closer to Tom, but not in a threatening way. Instead, it lowered its head to Tom's level, in what seemed like a gesture of gratitude. As Tom stood there, just feet away from what was supposed to be the galaxy's deadliest predator, he realized he had stumbled onto something extraordinary. This wasn't just a scientific discovery. It was the beginning of a connection that would change everything. 3 days had passed since Tom's crash landing. The station's rescue team still hadn't reached him due to a severe magnetic storm, but Tom barely noticed the time passing. He was too busy making the most important discoveries of his career. Swift, the injured shadow stalker, had not left the area around Tom's shuttle. Instead, the creature had turned their crash site into an incredible learning opportunity. Tom spent hours observing and documenting everything about his new friend. "Fascinating," Tom muttered, watching Swift's skin patterns change as the creature examined a piece of equipment Tom had shown him. "You don't just make random patterns, it's a language." Tom had noticed that Swift's skin created different patterns for different situations. Sharp, jagged patterns meant danger or discomfort. Slow, flowing patterns showed calm or curiosity. Swift even started using specific patterns when referring to Tom, a spiral that reminded Tom of his classes. The biggest surprise came on the morning of the 4th day. Tom woke up to find something placed carefully in front of his shuttle door. It was a collection of local plants, arranged in a way that couldn't be accidental. "Are you bringing me samples?" Tom asked in amazement. Swift's skin rippled with the gentle pattern that Tom now recognized as happiness. The creature had noticed Tom collecting samples before and was now helping with his research. Tom began cataloging the plants, speaking his observations out loud as he worked. Swift watched intently, those 4 purple eyes focused on Tom's every move. When Tom got excited about an unusual specimen, Swift's patterns would swirl faster, matching his enthusiasm. "You understand emotions," Tom realized. "You're not just smart, you're empathetic." As if to prove this point, Swift began teaching Tom too. The creature would make a specific pattern on its skin, then point to something, a rock, a plant, or even the stars above. Tom started recording these patterns, creating the first human shadow stalker dictionary. "So this pattern means food," Tom said, copying the symbol in his notes. "And this one means danger. But what's this one you keep showing me?" Swift had been making a new pattern regularly, concentric circles that spread out like ripples in water. Every time the creature made this pattern, it would look up at the stars. Tom was recording another new pattern when his shuttle's emergency radio suddenly crackled to life. "Dr. Wells, this is Rescue Team Alpha. Do you copy?" Tom looked at Swift, whose skin had shifted to alert patterns. "I copy, Alpha. But before you come in, there's something you need to know. Doctor, our sensors show a shadow stalker in your immediate vicinity. Stay in your shuttle. We're coming in armed." "No," Tom interrupted quickly. "The shadow stalker is friendly. I repeat, do not come in weapons hot. I've made first contact." There was a long silence on the radio. Then, "Doctor, if you're under duress." "I'm not. Look, I'm sending you my research notes and videos right now. The shadow stalkers aren't just predators. They're intelligent, social beings. The one here, I call him Swift. He's been teaching me their communication methods." Swift moved closer to the shuttle, placing one of his 6 limbs gently on the hull. The gesture seemed protective. Tom realized the creature understood that others were coming and was worried. "It's okay," Tom assured Swift. "They're friends, like me." He made the swirling pattern that meant safe with his hands, something Swift had taught him. The creature's skin shifted to show the same pattern, but Tom noticed small, fast ripples underneath. Swift was nervous, but trusting Tom's judgment. As the rescue team's ships appeared in the distance, Tom knew he was about to face a lot of questions and probably some serious disciplinary action. But looking at Swift, seeing the intelligence and friendship in those purple eyes, he knew it was worth it. He had just changed humanity's understanding of the galaxy's most feared species. More importantly, he had made a friend that defied every expectation. 2 weeks after Tom's rescue, Outpost Station 9 was buzzing with excitement. News of his peaceful contact with a shadow stalker had spread quickly. Scientists from across the galaxy were arriving to see his research firsthand. Tom sat in the station's main conference room, showing his videos of Swift to a group of wide-eyed researchers. As you can see, their skin patterns are a complex language. Each pattern has specific meaning. The door burst open. Jack, the security chief, rushed in. "Dr. Wells, we have a situation. Another research team just landed. They're from Military Sciences Division." Tom's heart sank. He knew about NST. They were famous for turning scientific discoveries into weapons. What do they want? They say they're here to study shadow stalkers, but they brought capture equipment. Jack's face was grim. Big capture equipment. Through the conference room's window, Tom could see a massive ship docking at the station. Its hull was covered in heavy weapons, very different from normal research vessels. "Dr. Wells." A tall woman in a black uniform entered the room. "I'm Director Reed from NST. We've read your reports about communicating with the shadow stalker. Very impressive." "Thank you," Tom said carefully. "But Swift isn't a test subject. He's an intelligent being." Reed smiled, but her eyes were cold. "Of course. That's exactly why we're interested. A species this dangerous could be useful. You want to turn them into weapons." Tom stood up, anger rising in his voice. "I won't help you capture or harm them." "I don't think you understand, Doctor. We're not asking for permission." Reed handed him a document. "This is a government order. You will help us locate and capture your shadow stalker friend." Tom read the paper, his hands shaking. It was real, signed by high-level officials who didn't understand what they were dealing with. Suddenly, alarms started blaring throughout the station. "Multiple shadow stalkers detected," a voice announced over the speakers. "At least 20 of them, approaching from the moon's surface." Tom rushed to the window. In the darkness of space, he could see them, shadowy shapes moving with incredible speed toward the station. Their skin patterns were bright enough to see even from this distance. "Perfect," Reed said, smiling. "They're coming to us. Security teams, prepare for capture." But Tom was studying the shadow stalker's patterns. Thanks to his time with Swift, he could read them. His face went pale. Those aren't hunting patterns. They're warning patterns. Swift must have told them about the weapons. Through the chaos of flashing alarms and running personnel, Tom spotted Swift leading the group of shadow stalkers. His friend's skin was showing the ripple pattern. The one Tom had finally understood meant protect. "You don't understand what you're doing," Tom told Reed desperately. "They're not attacking. They're defending their territory. If you start this fight, everyone loses." Reed ignored him, speaking into her radio. "All teams, prepare to deploy capture nets. Use whatever force necessary." Tom looked out at the approaching shadow stalkers, then at the NSD teams preparing their weapons. He had to make a choice. Either stand aside and watch everything he'd discovered about peaceful contact be destroyed, or risk everything to stop this conflict. "Jack," Tom said quietly to the security chief, "remember when you told me scientific curiosity hits people killed? What about military arrogance?" Jack looked at the approaching shadow stalkers, then at the NSD teams. He nodded slowly. "What's your plan?" Tom straightened his glasses, determination in his eyes. "I need access to the station's external communication system, and I need it right now." In space between the station and the moon, Swift and his fellow shadow stalkers were getting closer. Tom knew he had only minutes to prevent a disaster, to prove that understanding was stronger than fear and friendship more powerful than force. Time seemed to freeze as Tom ran through the station's corridors, Jack right behind him. They could hear the MSD teams preparing their weapons, and through every window, the approaching shadows of Swift and his kind grew larger. "The communication array is through here," Jack said, using his security clearance to open a sealed door. "But what are you planning?" Tom rushed to the controls. "Swift taught me their language. Not just the simple patterns, the complex ones too, the ones they used to protect their home. On the main screen, they could see the shadow stalkers had stopped just outside the station's defense perimeter. Their skin patterns blazed with bright warnings, creating a beautiful but terrifying display in the darkness of space. "All teams, prepare to fire," Reed's voice came through the station's speakers. "Not this time," Tom muttered, activating the station's external lights. With quick movements, he began programming them to flash in specific patterns, the same patterns he had learned from Swift. "What are you telling them?" Jack asked, watching the lights create swirling designs across the station's hull. "The truth, that some of us understand, that we're not all here to harm them." Tom's fingers flew over the controls, making the lights pulse faster. "I'm showing them the pattern for Guardian, the same one they use when protecting their young." Through the window, they could see the shadow stalkers pause. Their own patterns shifted, becoming less aggressive but still wary. Swift moved forward from the group. His skin showed the spiral pattern he used for Tom, followed by the ripple pattern that meant protect. He was telling the others about Tom's help, about their friendship. "Director Reed," Tom spoke into the station's comm system. "Look at their patterns. Really look. They're not attacking. They're defending this entire sector of space. Every research team they've stopped was trying to exploit their world." On the screen, they could see Reed and her teams watching in amazement as the shadow stalkers began creating complex patterns together, a synchronized display of swirling lights and shadows. "It's their history," Tom explained, his voice filled with awe. "They're showing us why they're here. These moons, this whole system, it's not just their hunting ground. It's a preserve. They're its protectors." The patterns showed images of other creatures, of delicate ecosystems, of balance maintained over centuries. The shadow stalkers weren't mindless predators. They were guardians, keeping safe a part of space filled with rare and valuable life. That's why they attacked the research teams, Jack realized. They were protecting everything here from being exploited. Swift moved closer to the station, his patterns now showing the teaching symbols he had used with Tom. Through the complex dance of light and shadow, he revealed more. How his kind had watched humanity's expansion into space, how they had judged each encounter, how Tom's act of kindness had given them hope for understanding between their species. Director Reed's voice came over the comm, quieter now. "Stand down, all teams. I repeat, stand down." There was a pause. "Dr. Wells, I think we need to talk. All of us." The tension in space slowly eased. The shadow stalkers' patterns shifted to calmer rhythms, though they maintained their protective formation around the station. "You did it," Jack said, patting Tom's shoulder. "You actually did it." But Tom was focused on Swift, who was now displaying the pattern he had shown so often while looking at the stars, the one Tom hadn't understood before. Now, seeing it combined with other patterns, its meaning became clear. "Future," Tom translated softly. "He was trying to tell me about our future, about humans and shadow stalkers working together to protect this part of space." Through the station's window, Swift's eyes met Tom's. In that moment, both human and shadow stalker knew that everything was about to change, not through force or fear, but through understanding and respect. 6 months after the confrontation at Outpost Station 9, Tom stood before the Galactic Science Council in their grand meeting hall. Behind him, displayed on a massive screen, was an image that would have caused panic just months ago. A shadow stalker working alongside human researchers. "As you can see," Tom said, gesturing to the image, "the Shadow Stalker Conservation Initiative has completely changed our understanding of space exploration. In just half a year, we've learned more about our galaxy's ecosystems than we did in the previous decade." The audience, filled with scientists and leaders from across the galaxy, watched in amazement as Tom showed more images. Shadow stalkers helping to protect endangered species on distant moons. Swift teaching human scientists about complex space environments they had never understood before. New research stations built with shadow stalker guidance to minimize impact on delicate ecosystems. But the most important discovery wasn't scientific, Tom continued. It was about ourselves. About how quick we are to label something as dangerous just because we don't understand it. The main door of the hall opened, and Swift entered. Several council members gasped, but their fear turned to wonder as Swift's skin created a beautiful pattern of greeting, one that combined both shadow stalker and human symbols. "My friend Swift here is now the lead ambassador between our species," Tom said proudly. "He's helped establish communication protocols that all research stations are adopting. Thanks to him, we've learned that shadow stalkers have been protecting vulnerable space ecosystems for thousands of years." Swift moved to stand beside Tom, his purple eyes scanning the audience. His skin showed the pattern for share knowledge, followed by the one for grow together. "The Military Sciences Division has been transformed into an environmental protection force," Tom explained. "Their ships now help the shadow stalkers guard against poachers and those who would exploit protected spaces. The same weapons they plan to use for capture are now used to defend endangered species." Tom clicked to the next image, showing the new research center built on the moon where he had first crashed. "We've established the first joint human shadow stalker research academy. Here, both species learn from each other. Shadow stalkers teach us about space ecosystems we never knew existed, and we share our scientific methods and technology." Swift's skin rippled with the pattern for future, the same one he had shown Tom during their first meetings. But now it was combined with new patterns, creating a message of hope and cooperation. "The shadow stalkers weren't attacking us because they were mindless predators," Tom said, his voice filled with emotion. "They were trying to protect something precious. All they needed was one person to stop and try to understand." He showed one final image, a group of young human scientists learning to read shadow stalker skin patterns, while young shadow stalkers learn to use human scientific equipment. "This is our future. Not fear, but understanding. Not conquest, but cooperation." The hall erupted in applause. Even the most skeptical council members could see the amazing progress that had been made. As the applause died down, Swift created a new pattern on his skin, one that combined the symbols for protect, learn, and grow. "That's a new word in their language," Tom translated, smiling. "It means friendship across the stars." Later, as Tom and Swift left the council hall together, they paused to look at the night sky. Somewhere out there, dozens of research teams, human and shadow stalker alike, were working together to understand and protect the wonders of space. "You know, Swift," Tom said quietly, "when they called you the galaxy's most lethal predator, they were wrong. You weren't predators at all. You were guardians, waiting for someone to understand." Swift's skin showed the pattern that meant friend, followed by the one for always. In the growing twilight, human and shadow stalker stood together, proof that the greatest discoveries come not from fear, but from the courage to reach out in friendship.